Okay, so we're diving into Delhi today.
Uh-huh.
I think most people, when they think about Delhi, it just seems like this huge city, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Just a massive urban sprawl.
A megacity.
Exactly. But, and this really surprised me, it's not just one city at all.
No.
It's been rebuilt so many times.
Many times.
It's been the capital for all these different empires throughout history.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating how much history is kind of packed into that one space.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to try to unpack today in this deep dive.
Yeah.
The layers of Delhi, using what we have on it.
Right.
Historical accounts, some observations of the city as it is now, and really get at, I mean, it has this huge historical importance, right?
Yes.
But also this vibrant culture.
Absolutely.
And a lot of modern day issues it's grappling with.
Yeah, very complex.
Yeah, so if you're listening to this, think of this like your shortcut, your cheat sheet to Delhi.
Right. We're going to distill it down to the must-know information.
Yeah, what are the really essential things that have shaped this city over centuries, right?
Yes.
Not just what is it today, but how did it get here?
Exactly, and I think that's what makes it so interesting.
For sure. So to kind of kick things off, I came across this phrase, the city of seven capitals.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds almost like out of a storybook.
Yeah, it does sound a little mythical.
Yeah.
But there's truth to it. Like, if you think back to ancient times, we find mention of Indraprastha in the Mahabharata.
Oh, wow.
And while, whether or not there's actual archaeological evidence is still debated, its presence in this really important early epic suggests that this area has long been recognized as kind of a vital center of power.
Yeah, so even in these ancient epic tales,
Yes.
Delhi's already on the map.
That's right.
So we're talking a very, very long history.
Yes.
And then we move on from that kind of, I guess, more mythological time to the Tomar and Chauhan dynasties around the 12th century.
Right, and this is where it really becomes a historically documented city.
Right.
These dynasties were key in establishing Delhi as a major political and commercial hub in northern India. They did a lot of building, a lot of developing infrastructure that kind of laid the groundwork for what came later.
And then from there, we get the Delhi Sultanate. And I always associate that period with like a really big shift in the city's identity.
Right, and the Sultanate, just to clarify, that means rule by a sultan.
Right.
And in this case, it was a number of dynasties, the Mamluks, Khaljis, Tughlaqs, Sayyids, and Lotus. And this is where we see a lot of Islamic influence spreading across the region.
Right.
They did a ton of building projects. And it's in this era that we see Indo-Islamic architecture starting to develop.
Right. And of course, we can't talk about Delhi without talking about the Mughals, which is what a lot of people probably picture in their minds when they think about Delhi.
Exactly. The Mughals, especially under rulers like Shah Jahan, left a really lasting mark on the city. I mean, Shah Jahanabad, which is now Old Delhi, is like this testament to their vision with the Red Fort, the Jama Masjid, and Chandni Chowk, which is that incredibly vibrant market. It was really designed to be this grand imperial capital.
Yeah, it's amazing to think about walking through those streets today. It's like you're literally following the footsteps of people from centuries ago. And you were talking about how each of these rulers made their mark architecturally.
Yeah.
What are some good examples of how we still see that today?
Okay, so this is where you really see that historical layering in action. So, for example, there's the Qutb Minar, which is this incredibly tall minaret.
Right.
Its construction started under the Delhi Sultanate.
Okay.
And it shows those early Islamic architectural styles that were developing in India. Then, if we fast forward to the Mughals, we have Humayun's tomb. And this is a really cool connection. Humayun's tomb is considered like the prototype for the Taj Mahal. You can see similarities in the garden layouts, the raised platform for the tomb, even the use of white marble.
So when people see pictures of the Taj Mahal, they might actually be looking at the legacy of Delhi in a way.
That's right. It's echoes of that earlier Mughal architecture in Delhi.
That's so interesting. Okay, so we've seen Delhi evolve through all these different empires all this time, but then things change quite a bit again with the British, right?
Yes, in 1911, the British decided to move their capital from Calcutta to Delhi. It was a big moment.
Huge shift.
It shifted their whole imperial strategy, and it also led to them creating a whole new city right next to the old one.
Right.
And this is where Edwin Lutyens comes in.
The architect.
Yeah, he was the main architect for New Delhi. He was tasked with designing a capital that would really project British power.
Yeah, and you can see that in the way the city looks.
Oh.
How would you contrast Old and New Delhi?
Well, Old Delhi is all about these narrow, winding streets. It's really dense, bustling markets. It feels very organic, like it grew over time. But New Delhi, it's completely different. You have these wide avenues, lots of trees, huge government buildings like the Secretariat Building, Rashtrapati Bhavan, which used to be the Viceroy's house, and big landmarks like India Gate.
Right.
It's much more planned.
Yeah, much more intentional.
You can really see the imperial ambitions there.
Right, and so it's like two very distinct cities.
Yeah, side by side. And that actually had a lasting impact. It led to inequalities in terms of infrastructure, access to resources in different parts of the city that are still being dealt with today.
That's fascinating. And it's interesting that even now, New Delhi is still the main political center of India.
Yeah, it's where the parliament is, where the government makes decisions, where all the big national events happen. So even though it came from that British imperial project, it's now really central to independent India.
So we've talked about the history, we've talked about politics, but Delhi is also known for its incredible cultural diversity. Right. It's the big melting pot.
Yeah, it really is. Delhi has attracted people from all over India for centuries. People were coming for all these different reasons.
Right.
And that created this really rich mix of cultures, religions, and traditions. And you can see it in all the different religious sites throughout the city.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. We've talked about how all these different empires shaped the physical city, its political identity, but the culture is a whole other thing, right? Shaped by all these different people and influences. So what are some examples of that?
Okay, well, there's the Nizamuddin Dargah, which is a shrine dedicated to this really revered Sufi saint. People of all different faiths come to the Dargah, and there's this tradition of qawwali music that's performed there, which is really beautiful and moving.
Right.
Then you have the Jama Masjid, which is one of the biggest mosques in all of India. It's a great example of Mughal architecture. And then there's the Gurudwara Bangla Sahib, also called the Golden Temple of Delhi.
Right.
It's a major Sikh shrine, and it really embodies this idea of selfless service. Right.
They have a langar there, which is a community kitchen where they serve free meals to thousands of people every single day.
Wow. And you have all these different faiths coexisting, interacting. It's really amazing.
Yeah.
And of course, we can't forget the food. I mean, everyone talks about the street food in Delhi.
Oh, yeah?
It's like its own cultural experience.
It really is. And again, you see those different historical and cultural influences coming through in the food.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So if someone's listening to this and thinking, okay, I got to go to Delhi, I got to try the food, where do they need to go?
Okay, well, for Golgappas, you got to go to Bengali market. It's the best.
Right.
Then for butter chicken, which is a classic, you have to go to Moti Mahal.
Right.
They're really famous for it. And then there's this place called Paranthi Wali Gali in Chandi Chowk.
Oh, I've heard of that.
It's this narrow street filled with all these shops selling paranthas, which are these stuffed flatbreads. You have to try it.
Amazing.
And then finally, if you want kebabs, go to Kareem's, also in Old Delhi. It's an institution. Sounds amazing. Okay, so we've covered history, culture, but what about Delhi today? I mean, it's a megacity.
Yeah, it's home to over 30 million people.
Over 30 million. That's incredible.
It's grown so quickly, which is good in some ways, but it's also led to some big challenges.
What are some of the biggest things the city is facing right now?
Well, pollution is a major issue, especially the air pollution. In the winter, the smog gets really bad.
Right.
It's a real health hazard. The Yamuna River is also in pretty bad shape because of pollution. That's a key water source for the city. And then, of course, traffic and overcrowding are just a fact of life there.
Wow, it sounds overwhelming. But there must be some positive things happening too, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Delhi has made a lot of progress. The metro system is fantastic. Yeah, it's really efficient, covers a huge area, and it's how millions of people get around every day. Gurugram, which is right nearby, has become a tech hub. Lots of startups and multinational companies. It's really driving economic growth. And then the city is also trying to get greener with more electric buses and green spaces. It's a long process, though.
Right. So what about the people? What would you say defines the people of Delhi?
I think despite all the challenges, they're really resilient.
Okay.
There's this energy there. You see it in the students, the entrepreneurs, the street vendors, everyone working hard, making their lives. It's a vibrant place.
So what does the future hold for a city like this? I mean, it's already changed so much.
That's the big question, right? The government's investing in smart city projects, more electric buses, more green spaces. But the real challenge is making sure development is sustainable.
Right.
How can the city keep growing without destroying the environment and making life harder for people.
Yeah, it's about finding that balance.
Exact.
But Delhi has always been reinventing itself.
It has, over and over. It's gone through so much change, so much upheaval. It's adapted every time. So I think that's going to continue. It's going to keep changing and finding new ways to face the challenges of the 21st century.
And, as we've been talking about this, it really strikes me that you're right. Delhi is more than just buildings and roads.
Yeah.
It's almost an emotional thing.
It is. For a lot of people who live there or whose families come from there, it's this really deep connection. It's not just a place. It's like part of their identity.
Yeah, and I think that's something that people who haven't been there might not fully grasp.
Yeah.
It's more than just a city. It's like this living, breathing entity.
Exactly.
So I think that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Delhi. We've covered so much.
We have.
All those layers of history, the incredible mix of cultures, the challenges of being a megacity, but also the hope for the future.
Yeah, and as we wrap up, I'd like to ask our listeners, what part of Delhi's story really resonates with you?
Yeah.
How does the city's history shape its present? And what does that mean for the people who live there today? It's something worth thinking about.
Absolutely. And we hope that by pulling together all this information, we've given you a good understanding of Delhi.
Yeah.
A good starting point.
A jumping off point for you to learn even more.
And maybe even inspire you to go visit someday.
Yeah.
So thank you for listening.
Thanks for joining us.